Hello everyone, my name is Tato Khatebe. I am the first year coordinator and the undergrad coordinator in the Jewellery Design department at the University of Johannesburg. For today, I'm going to be telling you what it takes for you to become a jewellery designer in South Africa. I'm going to be telling you about the course that we offer here at the university. I'm going to be running you through the design process that we follow in the department. And I'm also going to be giving you all the career prospects that you can look forward to should you graduate from the department. I'm going to be telling you what it means to be a jewelry designer. But before we can talk about what it means to be a jewelry designer in particular, I think it's important for us to understand what it means to be a designer. I like to classify a designer as a person who problem solves but uses critical thinking in order to come up with solutions. This is a problem solver, as I said. But when I speak about problem solving, I'm not necessarily meaning problems in the negative sense. In our case as a jewelry designer, or just as a designer in general, especially in clothes or jewelry or anything that is personal adornment, I like to think of them as good problems. So an example I'll give you is if somebody's getting married, they'll come to you as a jewelry designer and then they'll say, I need you to please design and make a ring for me. Now that would be classified as a problem. What your job is as a jewelry designer is you're now having to take that information that the client has given you and you now have to conceptually, as I said earlier on, and using your critical thinking, go through a design process that will then land you in a particular position where you have now fulfilled that problem, which means that the customer is happy. So that's what I mean by it's a good problem. Now that we have spoken about what a designer actually is, if we're now going to put that in the frame of a jewelry designer, what that means is your job is to now take the problem that the client has given you, the good problem, and now you have to work your way through in order to go through the design process to design and manufacture something that the client will be happy with. Now, when we speak about jewelry design, I don't want you to only think of it as personal adornment. What I mean by personal adornment, I mean things that you wear on your body. Jewelry can also fall in the sphere of a visual artifact. For instance, if you've made stuff that can sit on your table for decorative purposes because of their aesthetic value, that is also something that falls within the realm of jewelry design. What we do in the department is you can kind of think of us as miniature engineers, because an important part of the conceptual jewelry design field is being able to construct jewelry pieces using a variety of different techniques that exist within the industry. And that is a very important part of what we do specifically at the Department of Jewelry Design at UJ, as compared to other departments where, for instance, they might only be focusing on commercial jewelry. And the commercial jewelry is the stuff that you can normally think of when you think of jewelry design as a layman person thinking about what this thing is. Just to break it down a bit more, when I speak about commercial jewelry, I'm talking about, let's say we're looking at a ring. You're looking at a single stone ring and maybe it's got some diamonds on the side of the band. Those are what you would call run-of-the-mill jewelry pieces, and that would be classified as commercial. We do teach you how to become a commercial jewelry designer here as well, but our main focus would be on the contemporary. Now, when I speak about contemporary jewelry, I'm talking about, as I mentioned earlier on, you're making art jewelry. So by art jewelry, it means there's conceptual thinking behind the pieces that you make. You don't just get given a piece that you're expected to make and then you're sitting behind your bench and that's all you're making. You have to go through the entire design process for you to come from your inspiration all the way up until you get to your final piece at the end. I will now talk to you about what those different design processes are so that you can understand a bit more what I mean by that. The first thing that you have to think about is your inspiration. Now, the inspiration means based on whatever the theme is that you've been given within a particular project, your job as a student is to use internet sources or go to the library, or even if it means going outside and actually finding inspiration from nature outside, that are the things that you have to now come together and bring, and you're going to use those as the inspiration for you to start going through the process. From the inspiration, we are then expecting you to draw that inspiration. We call that second step as reference drawings. Okay, so the reason why you have to go through the reference drawing process is because you are focusing your piece around that specific inspiration, you need to have a feel of how that object or the form of that object is when you are designing the entire piece, which is why it's important for you to draw your inspiration before you can move over to the third step, which is the concept. When we talk about concept, the easiest way to understand what a concept is, it's an initial idea. When I say initial idea, I mean you haven't really thought about anything else outside of what you think the piece might look like at the end. So your concepts can be, you can have as many concepts as possible. Usually at first year level, I would give the students a set number of concepts that I want them to do, because sometimes students get stuck and say, oh, I'm not sure, should I do 3, should I do 5? So I'd usually say, maybe give me 10 concepts, but they must be varied, they need to be different. That is step number 3, coming up with your concepts, which are your initial ideas. Then we move over to step number 4, that is our design development. What that means is, once you've come up with all your concepts, 10 of your concepts, we can get to choose a variety of them, let's say 3 or 4 of them. Your job is to now take that piece, that initial idea, and now you have to develop it further, which is why it's called design development. What that means is, you are now having to think about all the different elements and principles that you would have learned in design. So you need to now start thinking, how am I going to make sure that this piece comes out the way that I envision it to be, using the different elements and principles so that I have something that is workable at the end. That would be your step number 4. So that process happens sporadically until you get to a point where you feel that something is solid that you can work with. Step number 5 would be, you choose one of the design developments that you're happy with. That then gets moved over to the final presentation drawing. Final presentation means you have now developed this piece to a point where you're happy with it, and now you need to show us as the lecturers, what does this piece actually look like? Once that piece has now been made and you're happy the way that it looks like, then you move over to the final step, which is your technical drawing. What a technical drawing is, it's made up of 3 different views. So you get your top view, so you need to imagine, based on all the steps that you've taken, what is this piece going to look like when you're looking at it from the top? And then you've got your front view. That's when you also start to think, what is this piece going to look like from the front? And then you've also got your side view, which is the same thing. What is this piece going to look like from the side? This final step, this technical drawing step, is very important because this shows us as lecturers that you have really thought about what the piece is going to, how you're going to necessarily make the piece and what the piece is going to look like. And it has to be drawn to scale, meaning it has to be drawn to the size that it has to be when you are going to be manufacturing it. As soon as your technical drawing gets signed off by the lecturer, you then move over to the workshop and then you can start manufacturing. From a first year point of view, majority of your year is spent on the basics of jewelry manufacturing. What happens is sometimes students who come to the department with prior knowledge might find that the first year is a bit easy, which is okay, but at the same time we believe that there are some techniques that we as lecturers do know that we can teach you, even though you might have prior knowledge. And even if it might be the basics, as I said, basics being, for instance, I'll give you some examples, would be piercing. Piercing means cutting out. An example that we do in first year would be a butterfly earring and pendant. We use that as the theme because the veins and the wings of the butterfly are very conducive for the piercing process. Another basic technique that we have in the department is soldering. Basically what soldering means, just to put it in layman's terms, is when you are connecting a singular piece to another piece. We can call it gluing if I'm going to use that term. So as an example, the students might make a simple wedding band, just a simple round wedding band. They create a bar of metal, they bend it round, making sure that each of the ends meet 100% flush. Then you take your solder, you place it on top of where the solder seam is, you heat the piece up, and then the solder will run 100% where the piece has now been joined. There's a whole variety of things that you have to do in order for soldering to happen. It's not just as simple as that. As I said, the piece has to be flush, the piece has to be clean, and you need to be sure that you are using the correct grade of solder in order for the soldering to happen 100%. Another thing that is very important is the correct use of your tools. Now, in first year, when you arrive at the department, you're expected to purchase a toolbox. This toolbox has all the basic hand tools that you'll need, and if you do take care of these tools, you'll be able to use them for your whole undergrad career. Of course, there are other tools that we could count them as consumables in that they might break, depending on how hard you're working them. For instance, drill bits. Drill bits break quite easily. Saw blades also break quite easily, but they are included in your toolbox. But as soon as those break or they maybe wear down, you are going to have to replace those. But that is stuff that, as I said, when you get to the department, you get taught how to use them to make sure that they do last as long as possible. But the inevitability is they will end up breaking at some stage. So you need to be cognizant of that. Tools that do not break and they will last as long, as I said, throughout your whole career would be your pliers. You get a whole range of pliers that you need to use depending on the piece that you're trying to make. You get your saw frame. Saw frame is a very important tool. I believe it's the equivalent of a stethoscope for a doctor. So if you've got a saw frame and a hammer, I think that you can make anything. And then a third one would be a ring mandrel. A ring mandrel, and I'm using this as an example because we spoke about a ring earlier on. As I mentioned, you are going to make a ring round, but we are not machines. We're not built to make things perfectly round. So after you've bent your ring and then you've soldered it, you'll look, okay, the ring doesn't look like it's 100% round. You then take the ring and you put it onto the mandrel and then you hammer it around. A mandrel is basically we can call it a steel block. It tapers from thin all the way to thick. The reason why it tapers is so that you're able to place the ring on top, hammer it, take it out and then flip it to the other side and then hammer it again so that you're forming a perfectly round ring. So those are some of the basic tools that you'll need. There are obviously a lot more that if you do register for the department or register to study at the department, we will run through all of those tools. Second year is a bit of a step up compared to first year. You're no longer seen as somebody who needs to learn the basics. So all the basics that include your soldering, your sewing, your drilling, your filing, and so on would have been mastered in first year. By the time you get to second year, this is a point where I believe you can have the most fun because you're kind of in the middle. And what happens here is this is where your designing also takes a bit of a step up and you do spend a lot more time in the design room where you are honing the skills a little bit more. There are some technical projects that happen in second year as well. Most important of them being the stone setting. Stone setting would be you've got your ring or your pendant, whatever the case might be, and now you need to design around a specific gemstone. The gemstone then gets put into the piece and you then get to set this piece. By setting, I mean putting your stone inside the piece and then securing it with the different prongs to make sure that the stone doesn't fall out. Third year level is exit level now. This is where you get to take the culmination of what you've done within first and second year now comes into third year. Third year is very important because by the time we get to, as I said, the second semester, you spend that last 3 or 4 months working on your body of work. Now this body of work is what is going to be shown to the external moderator who comes at the end of the year. They do the marking. We are involved in the marking, but the final decision gets made up to them. You are going to be asked to, okay, what can you do that happened last year or the previous year that you can now bring into this final body of work that you're doing to make sure that all the technical stuff that you've learned within first and second year. So first year, the most technical thing that you do there would be let's say piercing. Second year, the most technical thing you do would be setting a stone. So third year, how are you going to put all of these pieces together to make sure that this final body of work is an amazing body, so that when the moderator comes and when final end of year exhibition happens, what have you produced for us? Another important part of our course is, of course, the theoretical modules that we have within the course. From first year all the way you get to third year, there are 4 different theory modules. Number 1, which only exists in first year, is called Technology, Jewelry Technology 1. If you pass Techniques 1, that falls away altogether, and then you'll move over to second year. And then from second year, These three modules I'm about to mention now all exist from first year all the way. I just wanted to mention what happens in first year only. Okay, and then we've got design management. Design management is basically business studies. So you get design management 1, which happens in first year, design management 2 in second year, and design management 3, which happens in third year. As I mentioned, it's design studies. What happens in design studies or design management is you get taught how to be an entrepreneur, how to run your own business, and you also get taught all the different ways in which you can apply what you've learned within the practical side of your work into a business setting. And then you get contextual studies. As I mentioned, similar to what happens in design management, you get contextual studies 1, contextual studies 2, and contextual studies 3. Contextual studies is basically the history of art, and you also get taught how to write academically. It's very important, depending on what you want to do with your career, that you learn how to write academically, which includes being able to reference properly, being able to cite all your sources within your documentation, being able to not plagiarize. I want to make that plagiarism is it's frowned upon entirely. It's something that can get you into a lot of trouble if that happens. But within contextual studies, you get taught about what to do and what not to do. So you basically get taught how to write and how to interpret all the jewelry and art movements that exist right now. That's contextual studies. And then the last one would be gemology. Gemology only exists in second year and in third year. What gemology is you get taught how to identify stones. You'll be given a set of stones that you now have to, based on what you have learned, based on their internal properties, based on what you look at them, and on looking at a piece, looking at a stone, you have an idea of what it could be based on what you've learned. But when you go through all the different tools and the different machinery that has to involve you identifying this particular stone, that happens within the gemology course. And all of these modules that I've mentioned, they all have their own assessments and their own tests and assignments that are encompassing all of them. So if I'm going to put a split between how much percent do you spend practically and how much percent you spend theoretically, I would say it's a 60% practical and a 40% theory. And when I say practical, that includes design, drawing, and techniques. And then your other 3/4 modules would count as your theory. I studied jewelry design from the year 2007, and I graduated in 2011. And then from there, I got a job to lecture as a techniques coordinator at the Durban University of Technology from 2012. And I spent 2 years in Durban, came back to the University of Johannesburg to be a part-time lecturer from 2014 until 2016. And from 2016, I spent 6 months in Cape Town, and I was a merchant buyer for the Foschini Group, for Stearns & American Swiss. I only spent 6 months there because the UJ bug caught me again, so I decided to come back to UJ. And when I came back this time, I was hired on a full-time basis, and I've been working here ever since. So during that time, from 2012 until present, there's a number of things that I have done. The grandest thing that I've done within that time is in 2014, I entered a competition. It's called the Samsung Inspired Design Competition. It was open to graphic designers, to product designers, to fashion designers, jewelry designers, architects. It was open to a wide range of people within the design field. And I ended up winning the jewelry competition section of it, which was a big deal for me at the time because I did a lot of photo shoots. It was the first time I got to see a lot of people paying attention to the work that I'm doing, which was part of the reason why I decided I wanted to start my own business as well. So I do run my own business, and I opened that in 2017. What my business is, I focus on a lot of weaving as part of my technique, which I do in my business. It's not the main focus, but it's what I am known for, and which is the reason why I won the competition in 2014. So when I speak about weaving, I'm one of few people within the country that uses the weaving technique within the jewelry field. What weaving basically is, the best way to explain it is interlocking wires that are interlocking into one another to create something that is solid. So in other words, if the wire isn't 100% interlocked successfully, the piece kind of falls apart. So the weaving, you need to make sure that the wire that you're using is 100% solid. You need to make sure that they're all 100% even. I only know of one other person who does do the weaving at the level that I'm doing it at. And I'm very proud to say that I'm probably one of the few people who are doing that within the country. Also, I do teach the weaving technique within the department as well, because I think the knowledge that I have would help the rest of the students as well to be able to pull from this very important technique. It is an indigenous knowledge technique, and I think it's important that we show what we are capable of doing as African people within our institutions. So it's something that I do try to push quite a lot.